The forest was unusually quiet that morning. Not silent. Exactly, the wind still moved through the upper branches, shaking down the occasional yellowed leaf, and somewhere behind the trees, a wood pigeon called low and slow. But there was something in the stillness that didn't belong, a kind of suspended breath. Even the flies seemed to drift instead of dart. Lena stood just off the gravel track with her arms loosely folded, her boots half sunk in damp earth. She wasn't sure why she'd stopped walking. She'd been on her way back from the creek, carrying a thermos of water for the old man up at the caretaker's house. But something had made her pause at the edge of the woods, not a sound, not a shape, just a sense that something wasn't quite right. 30 years working the forest lines did that to you. The land starts to whisper before it speaks. Then she saw him, a large dog, just off the trail, seated in the flattened patch where the bracken thinned near the tree line. German Shepherd, older. His ears were pricked, but not in alert. They were more like hands half lifted in prayer, stiff and uncertain. His coat was dull with dust, his tail didn't wag. He wasn't hurt, but he looked like he had been waiting a long time. Lena squinted through the filtered light and adjusted her stance slightly. The dog didn't flinch. He blinked once. That was it. She knew that dog, not by name, but by sight. Belonged to the couple who'd taken the old farmhouse down near the stream bend. The one with the blue top still nailed to half the roof. They had a child, young, maybe 3, maybe 4. She remembered her running in circles through dandelions while the dog trotted behind her, tolerant and watchful. The kind of dog you trusted, but now he was alone, and the wind had shifted. The thermos felt suddenly too cold in her hand. Lena stepped forward a little, slow, careful. The dog didn't move, but his body tensed, just barely. His eyes never left hers, and yet there was something distant about them, as if he wasn't watching her at all, but something behind her, something that hadn't arrived yet. There was no blood, no leash, no sign of struggle, just a dog sitting, still beside the woods with too much silence wrapped around him. "Where's your girl?" Lena asked, softly. Her voice didn't carry. She wasn't even sure if she'd meant to say it aloud. Still nothing. Then he stood. It wasn't a panicked motion, no barking, no sudden energy, just a slow, deliberate rising like something had shifted inside him. And then he turned, not toward her, not toward the path, but deeper into the trees. She hesitated. For half a second she wondered if this was something simple. A dog wandered off, a kid chased a butterfly, a mother somewhere calling from the porch with worry in her voice, but nothing else. But Lena had lived long enough to know what dread felt like before it had a name. She looked back toward the fields. No smoke, no movement from the farmhouse, just that dog, walking into the forest with the kind of patience that didn't belong to instinct. It belonged to grief. Her boots made a faint sucking noise in the mud as she followed. The woods weren't dense, but the light inside them bent differently. Shadows leaned wrong across the ferns. The usual undernoise of beetles and birds had dulled, like someone had covered the land with a thick layer of gauze. The dog stayed just ahead of her, never rushing, never slowing to check if she was behind, as if he'd already decided the only way forward was to show, not wait. They walked, for what felt like 10 minutes, maybe more. It was hard to tell. The path wasn't marked, just the faint impression of something that had passed through, pressing leaves in odd directions. A small thing, a light thing. Then, without warning, the dog stopped. He didn't look back, didn't sniff. He just lowered himself down again in that same still posture, front legs folded neatly, head held steady. And Lena saw what he was facing. That wasn't much. Just a dip in the forest floor where the moss grew thick over an old tree root. A child's sock, blue speckled with white dots, lay caught in the roots like a discarded thought. Her breath caught, not from shock, but from the awful simplicity of it. She stepped closer, slow. The sock was damp, but not ruined. A twig lay across it, as if it had been dropped in passing, not torn, not hidden, just left. She turned to the dog. He didn't move, but there was something in his posture that had changed. Not fear, not alertness, resignation, as though this was all he could do now, wait beside the thing he could not protect. And behind them, deeper into the woods, something shifted, a sound, small or imagined. Lena didn't speak. She just listened. The wind pressed against the trees again, a low breath pushing through branches like a whispered warning. The forest didn't welcome them. Not today. She crouched, touched the sock lightly, still warm. The dog didn't blink. In that moment, beneath the dim green light of the woods, Lena realized she wasn't the one following. Something else was watching them. Lena didn't move. She stayed crouched near the moss-covered root, sock still cupped loosely in her hand, eyes fixed on the space beyond the dog, into the deeper woods where the sound had come from. It hadn't been loud, more like a soft scuff, something brushing past bark or stepping lightly across fallen leaves, but it didn't repeat. The silence after was thicker than before, almost swollen, like the trees themselves were holding something back. The dog had not turned. He remained still, statue-like, staring forward with a calmness that was not peace. Lena had seen that look in people at bedsides, at funerals, on long train rides home when nothing made sense, a kind of hollow patience that settled only after choice had been taken away. The air shifted again, cooler now. The light above had turned grayish, sun passing behind a gathering ceiling of clouds. The birds still hadn't returned to their chatter. Something in this part of the woods had claimed quiet as its language. She stood slowly, leaving the sock where it was. The ground was uneven under her boots. Beneath the moss, her heel felt something softer, upturned soil, disturbed recently. Her eyes flicked down, but whatever had passed this way had left no clear tracks, just pressure marks, irregular and unhelpful, not human, not quite animal either. She hated how familiar that kind of uncertainty had become. She looked back toward the dog. "What are you waiting for?" she whispered. Her voice felt strange in the air, like it didn't belong here. The dog blinked once, a breath moved his chest. Then, with the slow weariness of something who'd made this motion a dozen times already, he stood again, his head turned slightly, not toward the woods this time, but toward her. He wasn't asking anything, he was just checking, and then he began to walk. Not deeper, not back, but across sideways, following the edge of the dip, through a narrow band of hawthorn and toward the thicker knot of trees where the light barely touched the ground. She hesitated. This wasn't her job. She was meant to bring water to the old man, fix the back fence if she had time, maybe check the cameras set near the ridge. There were boundaries. Legal, procedural, emotional. But some boundaries felt foolish in moments like this. And besides, something inside her had already moved past the decision. She followed. The woods grew older in that direction. The birch gave way to oak, and the ground turned harder, more root than soil. Fewer ferns, more stone. She noticed things now, small shifts. A crow's feather lodged upright in a crack of bark. A strip of cloth snagged on thorns, pale pink, fluttering slightly as if it still remembered movement. Her breath caught again, but she didn't stop. The dog walked with measured purpose, not rushing, but no longer hesitant. He knew this path. They passed a broken gatepost, overgrown with lichen. Beyond it, a clearing opened, not wide, but oddly precise, as though shaped not by wind or grazing but by deliberate effort. It wasn't new. Logs lay in a circle, their bark stripped smooth, old ashes scattered in the middle. Not recent, but used. End there. Near the far edge, a shoe. Small, mud-smeared, half-buried in a nest of leaves, the kind with Velcro straps and a worn cartoon sun on the heel. Lena exhaled, sharply but without sound. Her body had gone still, muscles tense as wire, heart knocking in slow, heavy beats. The dog didn't go to it. He sat again, watching. She approached carefully, scanning the ground for movement, for breath, for any sign that the child had simply fallen asleep, but there was nothing. No warmth, no presence. Just that one shoe. And a bitter hush crawling through the trees. Then she saw something stranger. On the back of the shoe, just above the stitched sun, was a smear of dark brown, not blood, thicker, almost tar-like. She leaned in. The smell was faint but wrong, chemical, burnt, like something scorched and unnatural had passed nearby. Her thoughts blurred briefly. Old stories from nearby towns about chemicals dumped upstream. Feral dogs reacting oddly, wildlife thinning in certain pockets of forest. Nothing ever proven. Nothing pursued, but this was real. Right in front of her, and something had taken a child from her home and brought her here. Or worse, something had followed. Behind her the dog stood abruptly, his ears angled back, not forward, back toward the direction they'd come. She turned. The sound came again, this time clearer, a low crunch, leaves and twigs shifting under weight. Not human, too heavy, too rhythmic. Lena stepped closer to the dog. She didn't speak, didn't run. She simply placed one hand gently on his shoulder and felt him shaking. Not fear, restraint, then silence again. The sound stopped. The woods returned to stillness, but now it was a different kind of silence, expectant, waited. She scanned the trees. Nothing moved, but every instinct in her told her this was no longer about finding a lost child. Something else had been circling the edges of this for longer than she realized. Watching, waiting for someone to follow the wrong trail. The dog took one step forward, toward the darkness between two trees, the only path not marked by footprints or broken twigs. Lena followed his gaze, and for the first time, she saw it. Not a creature, not a person, but a shape like something had pressed itself into the landscape and then vanished, leaving only a hollow where it had been. Her breath fogged in the air. Though the day was still warm, something had passed through here and it hadn't come alone. Lena didn't move. The sock rested in her open palm now, its damp weight far heavier than it should have been. The dog stayed motionless, facing the same patch of woods, his ears rigid, his body taut without aggression. Still no barking, no whine, just presence, a kind of quiet, aching loyalty that made her chest tighten. The breeze shifted again, but this time it didn't bring stillness. It stirred the high branches with a hollow, whispering tremor, like something distant was drawing closer but keeping out of sight. Lena rose slowly, the sock still clutched in her fingers. She didn't pocket it. She didn't drop it. She simply held it like a question she couldn't answer yet. Behind the dog, deeper into the trees, the underbrush moved. Not much, a rustle, low to the ground, too smooth for wind. Something was watching, or waiting. She could feel it. The hair at the base of her neck prickled. She turned slightly, scanning the line where light broke through the canopy, but the shapes between the trees were all wrong, too long in places, too short in others. None of them fully human, none fully beast. Then the dog stood again, but this time he didn't walk forward. He turned his head toward her slowly, not all the way, just enough. Just enough to check if she'd seen it too. Then his eyes slid back to the woods. She stepped up beside him. No commands, no words. Just proximity. It was enough. The dog's nose twitched. He stepped forward, but only once, then stopped. He didn't want to go further. Not yet. Lena crouched to his level, squinting into the tangled green ahead. There was no path now, only uneven ferns and the dark outline of a fallen tree split years ago by lightning. And just beyond it, a smear of something. Not color, exactly. Not blood. More like the memory of motion. A dragging pattern in the leaves. Parallel lines where something had moved, or been moved. The sock in her hand dropped to the ground. She crossed the brush, her body tight with caution, boots sinking softly into loam. The dog followed now, just a step behind. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The broken log was older than it looked, dry inside. Hollowed by beetles, the splitwood crusted with lichen. But beside it, tucked partially into the undercut where roots still clung to soil, lay something worse than fear, a child's toy, a stuffed elephant, one eye missing, its ear clotted with dirt half buried deliberately. Her breath left her. It had been placed there, not dropped, not flung, not the careless trail of a toddler wandering lost. This was intentional, hidden, almost respectfully. And that was the part that chilled her most. Because things that hunt don't usually cover their tracks. A snap, sharp, sudden echoed through the trees behind them. The dog jerked around, but didn't growl. His ears went back, his posture low. Not fight, not flight. Something older. Recognition. Lena turned to heart pounding, but there was no one. Nothing then. She heard it a second sound, slower, deliberate. Footsteps, human, bare measured, not crashing through, gliding. Like someone who already knew this place well enough not to disturb it. She couldn't see who or what, but the presence was unmistakable. Whoever was moving wasn't lost. And they weren't in a hurry. They were approaching something they already understood. The dog moved first, not toward the sound, away from it. Back toward her. He nudged her leg once with his nose, firm and quick, then backed a few paces, urging not out of panic. Urgency. Of another kind, protective, but conflicted, as if some part of him still wanted to stay. Lena followed, slowly, step by step. She didn't run. The forest wouldn't tolerate panic. Not here. Back at the clearing, she turned once more to look. There was no one, but the sock was gone. She stared at the bare spot where it had lain moments ago. She knew with absolute certainty she had dropped it there. It hadn't blown away. The forest wasn't playing tricks. Something had taken it, not carelessly, not greedily, just taken. The dog sat down again beside her, this time facing the opposite direction, toward the field. His body language had changed, not relaxed, but grounded, resigned, maybe. Like whatever had been between those trees was part of a memory he didn't want to carry, but couldn't let go of. And Lena, still staring at the empty patch of moss. I understood that something in this forest had memory, too, not instinct, not hunger, memory. Whatever had taken the sock wanted them to know it was watching, that it knew the girl, that it hadn't finished yet. She didn't speak. There was no one to hear her. The wind dropped again. Not silence, just pause. The kind of hush that falls when something is deciding whether to come closer or disappear for good. Somewhere ahead, the leaves rustled. Once, a single sound, then nothing. The moss beneath Lena's fingers was damp, clinging slightly to her skin as she drew her hand away from the child's sock. She didn't lift it. Something in her resisted the act, as if disturbing it might undo whatever fragile thread had been left behind. Behind her, the dog remained motionless, eyes fixed ahead, not on the sock, but on something just beyond it, still and intent, like he was listening for a sound only he could hear. Then it came again. That movement, faint, almost imperceptible, not the wind this time, not imagined. Lena straightened slowly, brushing her fingertips against her jacket. Her breath caught on the air, her instincts sharpened by years of unspoken knowing. A small crack of underbrush, farther in. Not heavy like a boar, not rhythmic like a deer, a softer disturbance, hesitant. She couldn't yet say if it was hope or something worse. The dog rose, not fast, but with sudden purpose. He didn't bark, didn't run. He simply turned his head slightly toward her, holding her in that unreadable stare, not pleading, not commanding, and then began walking again, deeper into the trees. Not the same path they'd taken before. This time the trail sloped downward. She hesitated. Her knees ached from crouching. Her mind was trying to sort possibilities. None of them good. But she followed, one cautious step at a time. The light was changing now. The forest grew dimmer, not from cloud but from depth. The trees thickened, bark damp with moss and age. Fallen branches crisscrossed the ground like forgotten barriers. Every step required attention. Still, the dog moved with the shook of something that had walked this way before. Not often, perhaps, But with memory, they passed an old stone boundary, a low crumbled wall, half consumed by ivy and time. It once marked something, a property line, a burial plot she didn't know. But the dog paused there. He sniffed the earth once, not long, then turned and veered left. The terrain changed. Damp gave way to dry earth grown hard beneath needles of pine, and then she saw it, a jacket-child, dash-sized, pale green, caught on a crooked branch low to the ground. One sleeve twisted, dangling like it had been yanked through in hurry or fear. The fabric was torn near the elbow, but not bloody. Her breath clenched again. She stepped forward to free it, but froze halfway. The dog had stopped, ears rigid, head low, staring beyond the jacket into a hollowed-out patch of brush where the soil was disturbed. Shallow scrapes in the earth, erratic, not from digging, from dragging. Lena's chest tightened. She moved beside the dog now, crouching low, scanning the space for something, anything that might give form to the dread curling in her stomach. No smell, no cry, but the quiet was heavy, unnatural. Then the dog let out a sound, not a bark, not a growl, just a low, mournful whine that ended abruptly like it had been caught in his throat. He didn't move closer. He sat again, body angled slightly to block her view of the hollow, as if what was beyond that patch of brush was not for her. Lena didn't push forward, not yet. Something was unraveling here, and she didn't know who she was in it. A rescuer, a witness, or just too late. A breeze moved through the trees. Then, sharper than before, it rustled the high canopy, sent dry needles whispering against each other. The dog's gaze didn't shift, but Lena turned suddenly, reflexively. Someone had spoken, not close, not clear, but human. A voice, clipped and urgent, floated faintly through the trees from the opposite direction. Male calling a name, not hers. She took a step back from the hollow. The dog didn't follow. His ears twitched toward the sound, but his body remained still, as if anchored by something unseen, a presence, or a memory. She looked down at him, brow furrowed. "Is that who you were waiting for?" she murmured. But the words felt wrong, incomplete, and then the faintest echo of another sound layered beneath the voice, a smaller voice, a child's or the ghost of one, not quite crying, more like humming. Lena didn't speak again. She turned toward the direction of the sound, unsure what she'd find. She took one step, then another. Behind her the forest returned to stillness, but the jacket still swayed from the branch, slow and rhythmless, as if caught by a hand that wasn't there. Moved slowly toward the sound, boots brushing against pine needles, heart thick with a caution she didn't yet name. The trees opened slightly, revealing a shallow dip in the forest floor where the light softened, not golden, not warm, just dim with the weariness of late afternoon. There, crouched beneath the roots of a felled tree, was the girl. She wasn't crying. Her face was smudged with dirt, knees scraped a rip in her sleeve, but she was calm, like someone who'd long stopped expecting to be found. In her lap sat a stuffed rabbit, half its ear missing, held gently between small fingers. She looked up without surprise, as if Lena had always been meant to arrive. No shout, no rush into arms, just a blink and a quiet whisper. Ajax didn't leave me behind them. The dog still hadn't moved. He remained where he'd stopped, back at the hollow, beneath the trees, watching, guarding, as if drawing a boundary between what had already happened and what was still safe. Lena knelt beside the girl. Her joints complained, but she didn't mind. She placed a steady hand on the child's shoulder, just enough to let her feel the weight of presence, not rescuing, just being there. The girl leaned slightly toward her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. There was no need to ask why she'd run, no reason to name whatever fear had led her into the woods. It was already leaving her body, replaced by the quiet solidity of being seen. The sound of a man calling grew closer now. Branches crackled under rushed feet. A voice strained with panic, real, raw. The girl turned toward the noise, then looked back at Lena, eyes wide, not with fear, but with a small, aching relief. "Will he come with us?" she asked softly. Lena turned to look for the dog, but he was gone. Not far, just beyond the nearest ridge, where the trees grew thin and the light poured in low and gold across the ferns. His shape was barely visible, already blending into the warm tones of the forest. No hurry, no confusion, just a deliberate retreat. He'd stayed long enough to complete what he came for, and now his work was done. Lena rose slowly, helping the girl to her feet. The child clutched the rabbit, leaned briefly against her leg, then stepped forward as the man, pale with worry, eyes sharp with unshed panic, burst into the clearing. He dropped to his knees without words, pulled the girl into his arms, buried his face into her shoulder. She didn't cry, but she held him tight. Lena took one step back, then another. She let them have the moment, let the forest hold the silence later. When the three of them walked out together, the man carrying the girl, Lena following a step behind, the sun had dipped below the ridge. The air was cooler now. Birds had returned to their songs. The jacket was still caught on the branch where it had been left. And beyond that, the dog was nowhere to be seen. They never found him again, not at the house, not along the paths, not even by the boundary stone where he'd first paused. Some said he must have followed scent trails back to some forgotten place. Others said he'd belonged to someone else once, and simply went back to waiting. But Lena knew better. He had waited for as long as he was needed, and that was enough. As the last of the light sank into the trees, a wind moved gently through the upper branches. It stirred the leaves, lifted the dirt from a small, perfect paw print near the hollow, one that would fade before morning. And in that quiet space between dusk and memory, the woods were finally still.